If you watched Star Wars The Clone Wars on Cartoon Network back in the day, you might remember this commercial.
I have need of your services.
Who are you working for?
As long as I get paid, it makes no difference to me.
Bomb!
Look out!
Duck, cover, roll, run, drive, cover, zone, done, hold, cover, hunt, run, drive, cover, fold, fun, duck, cover, roll, run, drive, cover, zone, done.
That commercial aired on September 30th, 2009 to promote Season 2 of Star Wars The Clone Wars, Rise of the Bounty Hunters, which aired the following days on October 2nd, 2009. I remember seeing this commercial on TV, and I loved it. Cartoon Network seemed to be pretty proud of it too. The song used in that commercial comes from the album Outloud and is called The Dud by DJ T-Rock, Squashy Nice, featuring Schools from Graffiti Death Threat. The song was released in 2007, 2 years before it aired on Cartoon Network. I was able to interview Joshua Montcalm, aka Squashy Nice, with his experience with Cartoon Network using The Dud. He tells a great story of how the song came to be, how the album came to be, and how Cartoon Network eventually used it to promote Star Wars The Clone Wars. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy learning about this moment in Clone Wars history.
Hey guys, before we get started, Josh is going to introduce T-Rock and himself. I did reach out to T-Rock, but was unable to make contact with him this time around, so Josh is going to do that, and then I will proceed with question 1.
DJ T-Rock, aka Travis Eller, is a DJ and a musician and an actor and a filmmaker in Los Angeles. I'm Joshua Montcalm. I'm a screenwriter in Manhattan, New York City, also known as Squashy Nice. And this is the story of how the Clone Wars trailer came to use a song from DJ T-Rock and Squashy Nice's album Outloud.
What did life look like for you around the time that you were recording Outloud and The Dud? What did that process look like? And how long did it take to complete the entirety of the album?
It took over 7 years from when I first recorded the track for The Dud to then it became The Dud, and then a couple more years before it made it into the Star Wars commercial. I was 23 when I first made the track in 2002. Yeah, my life was pretty simple then. It was record music, try to go to class, and try to make enough money to survive delivering pizzas. Musically, life for me at that point was I was trying to make the best music the way I wanted it to be for a good 5 years, ever since I graduated high school. It's a long journey, a long process to get to where you're making things that sound the way that you want them to sound. I was getting there at that point. T-Rock and I had already recorded an entire album that wouldn't come out for another 4 years, but that one eventually got released on a label in New Zealand, and then as streaming came about, it actually gets millions of streams these days. But at that time, I didn't know that. We already had an album that we were really proud of, and people would play it on college radio a lot and all over the country, and then in other countries. It was one of these things that just would get passed around, but we could never find a label for it. And I started working with other people on the scene and in Atlanta. I'm from Atlanta. When I was making the beat for The Dud, it was a bit of a transition period because I'd done a lot that I was proud of, and then I was also coming into my own in a way. Like I was really proud of that track and the way I was recording things and my whole process at that point. I recorded the first version of The Dud in my bedroom in my little studio, where I pretty much recorded everything unless I was recording in someone else's studio. It almost everything started in my little studio. I was really having fun with it. I remember finishing that one and just loving it, and it took a lot of work. You come up with one part and replace it and go back and forth. It originally had different drums on it. That was recorded before I recorded the first version of the Dud, but wasn't released until a few years after I'd recorded The Dud. And that album was called Techniques, Rock and Squash Techniques. And eventually, with streaming came about, that became a pretty popular album for an underground indie label album. And T-Rock moved to LA at that point, and I stayed in Atlanta. we hadn't worked on anything together for years. So some of these things take years to work out, to happen. So the recording of the album that the Dud eventually ended up on was after we finally got signed to a label, and we were like, well, we want to make another album, but he lived in LA, I lived in Atlanta. There wasn't even Dropbox or anything then, really. I mean, the internet was so weak back then. That was around 2006, 2005. So I would make music and mail it to him, like mail him a CD, and then he would record his cuts on there and mail it back to me. And he produced a couple of things that were really good on that album too. T-Rock was a very good turntablist and much like, a DJ that just cuts and scratches like crazy and gets the crowd going. But yeah, we would just play it over the phone. It was people my age now would know how it was at that point.
Can you explain a little bit about what Outloud and the Dud are about and what inspired them? What's your favorite song on that album, and how do you feel about the Dud today?
We wanted that album to show growth. Our first album was recorded mostly when I was 22 and didn't come out until I was 26. Outloud was recorded between that time and when I was 28. So I'd grown so much as an artist where I couldn't even really listen to that first album, even though that's our most popular album by far. We just wanted to push ourselves and try to make something creative and emotional, and we're both very, very proud of Outloud. I think it's our favorite album. And that album, we had some great vocalists on there. Jax was an Atlanta underground legend. Christopher Thurston is his real name, and he actually passed away around the time that album came out, which was like devastating for everyone. But he did probably my favorite song on that album.
Binkins, ragholes from coast to coast. Listen close. The prefix, please fix your double helix, re-rips, give, weak beats, remixes, dismiss, distance, 3-6, cross fingers that toss tongue to your mistress.
The Dud, also was right up there. It was a big album. It had 25 tracks on it, and Dud is top 3 on there for sure for me. But lyrically, it was an anti-war song, and I loved it. I loved what Schools did with it. There are a lot of new things that I recorded for that album, and then there were a lot of older songs, which were like the Dud, which had just been kicking around. That'd be on beat tapes. If you're working with other artists, people could try to rap on it or something. Like, I always loved that beat, but no one would ever try to rap on it or something. I think because it was just too dramatic. It was too overwhelming, I think, to try to put lyrics on. But at that time, T-Rock and I were an instrumental group. We would do like beats and cuts and samples. And on this second album that the Dud was on, we wanted to start using vocalists to fill out some of our songs and just really make it a bigger tapestry. He was DJing for a group called Graffiti Death Threat, and that's where Schools, the lyricist on the Dud is Schools, Skoolz. He got that track, and he just crushed it. When I finally got like the CD mailed to me of them finishing it, I was blown away.
What was it like having Cartoon Network approach you for wanting to use one of your songs in a commercial, and how did they even get in touch with you at the time?
Cartoon Network had always been in the background of a lot of stuff that we did, especially T-Rock. Being in Atlanta, that's where Turner Studios are, is where Cartoon Network is. And when I very first started working with T-Rock, back when I was 21, he was already working with this guy, Larry Morris, who was a producer of sorts at Cartoon Network. He loved T-Rock's stuff, but Larry at Cartoon Network was making a DVD of his entire album. So it was like music videos for an entire album. And it was really cool. It was very, very creative, and T-Rock was really funny, and I got to participate in that a little bit. And T-Rock produced some other commercials for Cartoon Network and also for Sci-Fi Channel. And he's also an actor who's been on some pretty big TV shows and has starred in some independent movies. Yeah, and then I had worked on a couple of projects for Adult Swim for Larry that didn't make it to the screen, and then he moved to Brooklyn to work for the Sci-Fi Channel. Yeah, that was effectively kind of the end of our creative work together for a while until we were finishing Out Loud, and then he got back in touch and really loved what we were doing. His fingerprints are all over just the visuals for the album. Like the opening track for Out Loud was actually a piece of music that I'd made for one of the Cartoon Network shows he wanted to do a few years before, called Sasquatch Motorcycle Hero, I think it was called. Yeah, so it just felt right to have him do all that and be a part of the creative presentation of that album. And he even shot a music video for us for a song called Men Are Scarce. A very cool video. It's very Cartoon Networky, and T-Rock and I are both in it. T-Rock shot his parts in LA and I shot my parts in Atlanta. So yeah, skip forward a couple more years. I'm working on trying to be a screenwriter at this point. I'm not really doing music anymore. At that point, I had taken a break to focus on this other endeavor. That's when we got the call from Larry, who was working on the Clone Wars project at Cartoon Network, and he wanted to use the dud for a promo for Star Wars Clone Wars. Yeah, I don't think I could believe it at the time, because I was like, well, I'll believe it when I see it, because I'd been promised so many times, that my music was going to be used on this or that.
What was it like seeing that commercial air live? And what is it like revisiting this commercial 15 years from when it first aired? Were you a Star Wars fan at the time?
So I was a Star Wars fan. It was really cool when that commercial came out. It took 7, almost 8 years for it to go from me working on the song in my bedroom to coming out, as a part of Star Wars. And my life had changed so much by that point that, yeah, that's how it struck me. Was just picture my younger self in his little studio making this song. Not, I wondered what that guy would think if he knew that it would be on the Star Wars commercial someday. That's what I always thought, and I still think when I see the trailer. But no, it was very surreal, because nothing had been done to alter the track in any way since I first made it like 7 years ago, and it still sounded great. And somehow they had the instrumental version for that. The one on the album doesn't have all that open space at the beginning, but at the same time, it was bittersweet, because I think most things when you achieve it are they come and then they go, but especially with that, because it was just a commercial. So after a month or so, it was just gone, and it didn't lead to anything else. And I'm just very surprised that and happy that people remember it, because it's not often you get to do anything really that gets remembered in any way. It was really cool to see, but I didn't really feel like, I felt kind of separate from it, because it was just my beat under this Star Wars imagery. I didn't. It was hard to connect the two together, because one is Star Wars and the other is just little me. And at the time too, I don't think no one cared. I told people about it. No one really thought it was a big deal. And you couldn't, because it was a commercial, you couldn't just sit down and watch it. You had to hope it came on Cartoon Network while you were watching TV. There was a little bit of controversy, I think, because as far as I know, I think it's the first ever time hip hop has been used in an official Star Wars piece. I remember hearing that. I think they wanted to use it on the DVD at the time, but they didn't. It didn't make it onto the DVD, and I think that was because of the hip hop doesn't belong in the Star Wars universe type thing. And also there was a 60-second version of it that is disappeared. It's lost media now. I'm glad that the 30-second one still exists.
Did you think about the audience at all of Cartoon Network when The Dud was going to be airing on TV? And the fact that it was mostly going to be kids seeing it? Did you ever think that that commercial was going to be so influential or would have stuck with people even 15 years after it aired?
I didn't think about the audience for it at all. So I'm very surprised. It's very, very cool to me. You know, you can't really, when you put anything out there, especially if you're putting out so much stuff, you can't really think about if anything's gonna hit or not hit. I only saw it as a commercial, you know, so I didn't think that I didn't see it as real content. It was on for a few weeks, and then you know, that's about how long it took me to spend the little bit of money I got for it, and then it was sort of lost forever. And so I'm really surprised that anyone remembers it. It's great to get to talk about it. It's fun to think of people having nostalgia for anything I had to do with.
Is there another song from that album you think would have paired well with a Cartoon Network commercial or a Star Wars commercial?
I feel like the Dud probably would be the best one for that. It was one of my all-time favorite. Every bit of that in my recording process for doing it was I would separate everything out into tracks and just over time tweak everything till I got it all exactly where I wanted it to be. And that one just had sonically like everything I always hoped when I would sit down to try to make a track.
Are there any other commercials that have used your music on television or in movies? And if so, what's your favorite use of your music in other media?
Yeah, that one, I mean, that has got to by far be the coolest use of my music in TV or movies. They used to use at least one other song that I had made with a group called Psyche Origami called Directions for an Adult Swim bump that was pretty popular too. I think it was the one that said, "We are against it with you" or something. And Robin Big used that same song, featured it in one of their shows too.
Jacket right there.
This jacket's hot.
Just straight sealess. Yeah. And we'll save this for him too, meaty. Next time he's in, I just pull this out.
That was cool because MTV2 basically only played Robin Big around the clock back then, so I could find it every other day on TV. It was a very cool time, and it was cool to have people reach out to me and say they heard my song out of the blue, and I didn't get to hear it here, but I had people tell me that it was playing in movie theaters before, you know, when they would show ads before the trailers, it was playing in movie theaters, and I miss seeing that and getting to hear that.
Is there anything you want to say to the people who were kids 15 years ago who were introduced to the Dud and your music through this Clone Wars commercial and remember it from so long ago? Or to anyone who has just supported you from the early 2000s and has enjoyed your music?
Yeah, I mean, to anybody who was listening to that song 15 years ago that has any affection for that little trailer that I got to be a part of, yeah, I would just, if I could say anything to anybody, just you know, whatever process or journey you're on takes a while sometimes, and you know, life is short, but it's also plenty long enough. So if you're passionate about what you're doing, you know, do it and do the best you can, and try to have fun and be kind to yourself and be patient with yourself. And yeah, just use the force, I guess.
And is there anything else you want to say to anyone who may be listening? Where can everyone else go find and listen to your music? And where can we stream the Dud and other music that you've made?
Thanks to anyone who's enjoyed anything I've ever recorded or have written. yeah, thanks for everything, and thank you, Amelia, and yeah, thanks for this opportunity to talk about myself and to talk about that project and talk about T-Rock and Squashy Nice. It's an era of my life that just a lot of big, broad emotions. A lot of growing up, early adulthood to later early adulthood. So you can stream Outloud and any of our music anywhere really. Spotify. My personal favorite album is one called All the Way, a solo album I did about 6 years ago. And you can find some of the vinyl and CDs and stuff like that still out there. Thank you, everyone listening.
That's it, everyone. That's the end of the interview. I want to deeply thank Josh or Squash for answering all of my questions from this specifically niche thing that I remember from back in the day in my own childhood, and I'm sure other people remember too. Thank you for listening. Thank you for clicking. Thank you for being here. I'm thrilled again to be able to have done this, and getting able to hear everything from Josh was awesome. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, T-Rock, even though he couldn't be here to I want to thank him for his contributions to everything too. And also thank you to Schools. I doubt Schools will ever hear this, but thank you, Schools, for your lyrics and your lyricism and your voice that you've contributed to this commercial. And I am not done searching for you, so maybe one day we'll get to talk about your side of the story to everything. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
This project was obviously very personal to me. The whole reason that I started this is because I recently went on a deep dive of Star Wars The Clone Wars commercials, and I found this one. It instantly took me back. And I knew if I remember it, I can't be the only one. So that's what pushed me to continue on through this process. I'm just really happy I finally get to share it all with you. I want to thank my drive of trying to hang on to nostalgia from my own childhood, and I want to thank again everyone that contributed to this commercial. I also want to let everyone know that I have reached out to Larry Morris to see if there's any other Clone Wars commercials I could do a deep dive on. If you remember this commercial or this song or either or in pair with each other, please let me know. I want to know that I'm not the only one. I know I'm not, so please let me know. Also, before I go, I had to listen to this album a couple times through this whole process, but this is my favorite.